Okay, folks, I think we're close enough. It's my pleasure today to introduce our 2021 Distinguished Alumnus Award for the Animal Sciences and Industries Department. Roy Henry, congratulations. I'll tell you a little bit about Roy, and you know, we've got a very nice plaque here. I'll get to him in a minute. And I don't know, Angie, can you read that wording down? I can't, so I blew it up. So,
I didn't make the original one. It's been the same forever.
So Roy received his BS degree in '72 from Animal Sciences and Industry. He spent his career raising swine and crops at his family farm, Henry's Limited, near Longford, Kansas. In 2000, Roy developed one of the first privately owned genetic seed stock boar multiplication sites in North America. He partnered with PIC, Pig Improvement Company, to raise terminal boars that were merchandised for commercial producers throughout the U.S. and internationally. He remained in partnership with PIC, producing seed stock until 2014. His family currently operates a commercial herd and recently completed a new 5,000 head sow facility. Roy's been a selfless giver of his time and knowledge. Understanding the importance of exposure to modern swine production, but not being able to offer farm tours, Roy developed on-farm YouTube videos to be used by classrooms and the public to learn about modern swine operations. He served on the Kansas Pork Producers Council Executive Board from '91 to '98 and was the '95-'96 president. He served on the National Pork Producers Council Board from '97 to 2003 and the National Pork Board from 2007 to 2011. He is currently on the K-State Livestock and Meat Industry Council. He's been a strong advocate for student training at the K-State Swine Teaching and Research Center. Roy and his wife Linda have 3 children and 10 grandchildren. And I will say Roy has been a supporter of our swine group, most recently with the new farming facility that we recently put together. So with that, Roy, I think another round of applause and we'll turn it over.
Oh, no, I get to keep that?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Day, for your introduction. I was glad to find out that I got a BS degree from K-State. So now we'll start our BS presentation. So how did I get to be the speaker here today? Well, when Dr. Odie called me and he said, you got this award, I said, okay. And he said, no, it's really an important award. It's a very nice award, and it is. And I thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then we talked, I said, what should I talk about? I really don't know much about anything, but know a little bit about quite a few things. And he said, well, I don't care. And I said, well, because I wanted something easy. I've talked about succession in the past, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just do that again. But I was going to give it a little more time and consideration, and then very shortly later, I read what I was going to say. So thank you, Dr. Odie, you helped me make up my mind, and I will go down that path. So when I started looking at what I said in a profitability conference a while back, I looked at it and I thought, I don't know that I agree with what I said. I can't really believe that I said that, because I was looking at it in the eyes of a recipient of a succession plan rather than the one that has to give it away. And so now I'm going up here and I got to tell you how I want to give away everything that I've ever worked for in my life with all the hours of hard work. And I'm supposed to be happy about it. And so that's my qualification for this presentation and why it's happening. When we think about succession, is how we change and transfer a business from one generation to the next business entity or person or family member that's going to maintain your business and run your business in the future. And there's many things that can limit your ability to do this. You have to have a person that's qualified, and you have to have the willingness of the other members in the business at that time to transfer to this member. In agriculture, we have a little bit of a unique situation. We have a vast amount of dollars in fixed assets and capital. There's very little cash. So when we think about estate planning, how do we figure out what you pass on to what heirs? Well, how much benefit do you give the one that has been on the business working with you, and how you treat the others? And we all know that fair isn't equal, but you have to work on that. You have to start the process early. The reason is things change. And if tax laws change and stuff, you need to be in a position to adjust with the time. One of the important things you do is who's your consultant. I would suggest that you get a tax attorney that's not your cheapest tax attorney to help you with, because a lot of this gets very complex. I think when my parents transferred the stock to their 4 children, it was relatively simple. But now today, because the estate was simpler than it has become. And now today, what Linda and I are facing is much more complex. And so, even though I'm kind of hesitant to do this, we must go forward. And we have to decide when these transfers occur. It's an important thing to decide. And also, at what point should your heirs have the knowledge of what you're going to do? I've talked to many people, they either don't have any value to pass the business on to, or they won't share any information with the heirs that are there. So when I think about our family, so how are Mark and Kate going to plan for what they do in the future if they don't have some idea of what we're going to do when we're gone? And many families have that happen. So family dynamics plays a huge role in this. I probably won the lottery on family dynamics. My parents, were never fought, never got upset. Whatever happened, there was always tomorrow. And that's kind of the attitude of our family. And so it's been a very easy transition because we all recognize the need for change. Life will go on, and then we'll have to adjust. Let's start with some pictures. Now, many of these pictures are older from other presentation. I didn't have a lot of time. That's an excuse. I know it's not a reason, but it's an excuse, so I'm going to use it to come up with new pictures and updates. So my grandkids, we took pictures of them. They're still in the cute stage. and now we've got, at least we got one here that's feeling up a little bit. And I point this at what to make a change.
Usually starting, you gotta hit the arrow first and then it works. And on the keyboard. Yeah.
What? I still have a flip phone. You expect me to figure this out?
We got a new hire here.
Stop share.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Good job.
All right.
This is a young factor, remember?
Yeah. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And every situation is going to be different. There's no cut and dried answer, but what's your estate plan? Basically, what are you going to do? And when I think about giving, I'll always go back to when I was a little kid and we went to church with my parents. And we went every Sunday, and then one time I saw how much Dad made the check for it. And I didn't think that we had any money or very little, because when we were in town, we couldn't stop and get pop and ice cream. We had to stop by the public water fountain and the water plant and get a drink of water. That's just the way it was. So when I see this check on the offering plate, I realized that they were giving more than just a little amount. And then also, Mom was always playing the piano or organ, and Dad was taking a nap. So I started learning 3 things, what to do. It takes a long time to become a good giver. It just doesn't happen. You have to work at it. When you start estate planning, you need to start doing it before you can afford it. My parents started gifting stock to the 4 kids of us and our spouses for a while, and then that thought was revisited, and then just went back to the 4 kids. Long before they had anything. So we had this piece of paper that said we own stock in this business, that really, good luck getting any money out of that. Because there wasn't much. And then there's always the one that, yeah, but I don't want to do it now. What we want is ultimately the wishes of the givers to be passed on to the given in the manner in which it needs to occur. This is a picture of my parents. Moved from Belleville. I was 1. So obviously, I don't remember a lot about this trip. Had a few dairy cows. Didn't take too long before we had a gas leak and had an explosion in the dairy barn, and Dad got burned a little bit on that deal. And then Wendell Moyer, extension swine specialist, talked to Jim, my dad, and said, have you ever thought about pigs? Why don't you raise pigs? And what I learned from my years at K-State, this cow's only giving me 1 opportunity a year, 1 calf. At least for the pigs, we could hopefully do better. So first we got a few and got some sale-born pigs. It didn't work out so good for us. And then because I thought we were going to get more than 1 per year, we picked Duroc and Pole in China. Well, I don't know what you know about breeds of swine, but if you want 2 unproductive breeds of pigs that aren't prolific, we picked 2. And so litter numbers were small. We would come up with this twins and triplets. Sometimes it did better, but it wasn't a good venture. And then we tried to build a farrowing house and heat it with a space heater. And sows were doing their nesting, and they got out and pushed it over into the tarp and burned it down. So about that time, we were starting to grow up, and off to college we went. Now, these are the people that are impacting our decisions throughout this whole process. Obviously, you start with Steve. I'm on the left, and start with Steve. He's a veterinarian. And then you see Mary, and she's an audiologist. Then you see Ruth, and she's a nurse. And then you have Roy, your presenter. I don't have any title behind my name. So that's what we had. And then we have Linda's and my 3 kids. On the left are Mark and Kate. Kind of worried me about Kate. She was a city girl, came from Kansas City, got to move right on the pig farm where 300 trucks drive in and out of the yard a year, had flies and odors, and she liked it, which surprised me. And so a delightful daughter-in-law, as well as Lindsay and Luke in the next picture. Lindsay knew what farming was all about. She came from a farm. And so, that was pretty normal. And then Amanda and Fadi's from Vermont, Jordan. And it's been great having Fadi in the family, because through all the political conversations and things that occurred in the U.S. in the past time since he's been in our life, he's had the Jordanian perspective, or a different world perspective. And it brings us back to reality, thinking probably the way we should. So my children all made wise choices on their spouses. These are the grandkids. The 3 at the bottom, I remember one time I went to a grocery store, and if you have 3 little redheads that have hair like that, you go somewhere, you get a lot of stares. So I had to keep looking back to see what was following me, because it just wasn't normal. But Reagan on the right is a freshman here at K-State. The next one is Walker. He's a freshman in high school. And Jackson's on the left, and he's a sophomore in high school. Top right, Meg is a sophomore in high school. The twins are 8th graders, and Mason is a freshman at K-State. And then on the left, Amani's here today. So obviously, but the other 2, they've gotten bigger. They've all gotten bigger. I is going to graduate from Oklahoma State this year. She went there because of competitive cheer. And so she was kind of upset that they didn't win their last football game, but she's had a lot of fun. She's gonna be a doctor. And Jay's a senior in high school and plans to go to work for next year. When I graduated from K-State, you have to make a decision what you're gonna do, because I never knew what I really wanted to do. And so I had to prove to Linda that I wasn't employable, so I went and applied for a couple of jobs and didn't get either one of them. So then we had our only one option, I had to go home. Well, that's the last thing in the world she wanted to do. She came from a farm, irrigation farm, and moved gated pipe. She was done farming. But if you ask her today, it's the best decision we could have made. I'll tell you, I've got to make a few more decisions since then, but not a lot. We were, at that time in life, there were breeding stock companies that were looking for multipliers. And we had a chance with the cattle to become a multiplier as well as PIC. We chose PIC because of size and scope of their business versus the cow. And through the time when I got out of school, pretty much I turned into a carpenter. You know, didn't know what I was doing, but you know, I got a little better with time. Not much, but a little bit. And so we became a PIC gilt multiplier in the early 1990s. And that worked fine for a while. And then Mark and Kate moved home in 2001, and we switched from gilts to boards. And we were one independent board multipliers for PIC. And I think we represented about 30% of the total AI board sales in the US. And so impact, the number of pigs genetically that could be traced back to our farm was really quite a few. And so we were an important part of PIC's program. And along the way, we kept talking about, we got too many animals. We have the farrowing barns and nurseries and finishing all on one side, and there's a risk. And because of where we were located, and I guess they thought Steve could pull a magic wand out of his hat and health would be good forever. We continued to be a board multiplication, but it didn't work out so well. We broke with PERS, and so we had to depop and repop. And because we were such a big part of PIC's business program, we tried to do that in a rapid fashion, which means you forget about the dollars and the cost of what you're doing, you just do it. Well, we broke in on Thanksgiving Day. We got depop, cleaned the barns, got rid of all the pigs, shipped them to Iowa, and I just about euthanized them because by the time you paid freight both ways, it just didn't work. And so it became another multiplier, board multiplier, did a breeding project in Ohio, and then moved them home, just sold our first boars, and we broke with PERS. That was Christmas Day the following year. So we didn't have a really very good run, and that was all Henry's Limited. And that's my mom. She just thought Henry definitely not needing an apostrophe. So our family was set up as a C corporation, which was a good decision in that time frame. It allowed us to do what we do and manage taxes, and it worked quite well. That's not the case today. You probably don't want to be a C corporation. And then our parents would gift annually shares of stock to each of us. And finally, when my folks retired, which would be like 5 years from now for me, I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, although I have a son that's ready for me, probably get there. The corporation bought the rest of the shares back from my parents. So then it winds up, well, I have the majority share, and then Steve and Mary were still left in the corporation. Ruth had sold out earlier in life. This is just a picture that was in the slides I didn't get deleted. That's what we moved on to in 1951. And these are where I got some other pictures. So the share value had increased. It had been a good business for us. There's many people to thank for the success of this business. When things work well, it's not one person that made it work well, it's many people. You know, Lisa Tokash was our veterinarian because Steve had a conflict of interest. And so that worked out quite well. Throughout our life, Steve was the one that kind of had all the answers that satisfied the question. Whether they were right answers or wrong answers, nobody ever asked, so we just used them. But, so if Dad and I had a disagreement about whether to go left or right or build this or build that, what we do, call Steve. Well, Dad thought Steve was on his side, and I thought Steve was on my side. And so he was just an automatic mediator, and we just kind of lived the way it went, so it went pretty well. So he can take credit for some success, but some of the failures, he maybe should have done something different too. So the plan of succession worked out the way my parents had decided to do it. And the 4 siblings, they still have Ruth in there, and I just took her out. So this is a way we could move our shares around. Ruth sold early on. It wasn't very long. We've been a corporation. She had a need for cash, so we sold out. So then that left Mary and Stephen Roy. With me, the majority. Mark came home. And so throughout this time, I thought, now, the next generation's here. How long are Mary and Steve going to hang on? What do I do? How do I set Mark up? How does this work? What if Steve and Mary never sell? And what if their kids become who I have to answer to? Because in our agreement, we didn't have anything to take that down. So we waited for our normal tax advice from our attorney in Kansas City. That was Steve and Mary and Roy. And we got there, and Steve walks in and says, well, the next generation's home. It's time for you to figure out how to get Mary and me out of the business. And Mary and I just go, what's this all about? We had no discussion. And so she went ahead and we talked about stuff that should happen and how it would happen. Walked out the door. I saw Mary, and she said, and I said to her, well, I didn't see this coming. I don't think I can afford to buy you out. And Mary looks at me and said, well, I don't know that I want to sell. And it's actually turning my head and figuring things out. That was the last discussion Mary and I had about it. We were just both aghast. But what I'm saying, if Steve doesn't do that, what happens? So even though he's a pretty good veterinarian, he's been really important to us on the business side. So they willingly sold their shares to Linda and me. And that makes it a lot different on how we handle our kids in the next generation. So now Linda and I are working to repeat the process and see if we can do as well as my parents did. You got to have a third party involved. So we actually had, Steve actually was a mediator. And we had a third party who knew what my parents want. We worked with her now. She knew what my parents want, what their wishes are. Ours very much mirrored my parents. We realized that money doesn't make you happy, and there's no reason not to use it when you're still living and see the value that it can do for someone else, if possible. Skilled legal counsel, tax laws change. Think what happens if the stepped up basis all of a sudden changes. Agriculture is very detrimentally impacted. Stock values fluctuate. Mindset needs to be time that you want to give. And Linda and I are still in there. When do we do this transfer? And so when do the kids need to know about the transfer, or do they? We don't know that answer, and it depends on the dynamics of your family. And right now everything's been good. So this is just an example that if we were to spread it out over time, and let's say, and I said I'll plan to die at 87 when I did this last time. That number's a little low. My mother-in-law is 95, so I'd like to, with your permission, I'd like to bump my number up to 90. But let's say I had $5 million to give away. That'd be $900 a day, or $330,000 a year if my goal is that I grow up and make no money between now and then. So what you can do, you can start giving along the way. and it's time for me to start, even though, I'm thinking as a giver, different than as a receiver. But it's time we start doing it, and the advice from us is to start now. And so the hardest part's letting go. And I believe that's my last one. So that's the advice from the Henry on what you do about success.
Questions?
Yes.
So do you maintain, or do you do like an annual valuation of the business? And then how do you value the business? So when you're getting ready to either bring somebody in or buy or sell, how are you placing a value on the business? I don't know about
The tax attorney does that.
Okay, and is it a value that is about the fixed assets, or is there also some value assigned to, I'll call it, future profitability?
I don't think we assign, and really, you saw the ones that had letters behind their name, and you're talking to Roy.
Okay.
And the wife, Linda, would know more about it. I don't think that we project future profitability in it at all.
Okay.
Because if you think about when Steve and Mary sold out, we had just become a board multiplier for PIC, which positioned us to be in the best position we've ever been in to make money. So we just try to get the actual, what the best guess of an absolute market value would be.
So it'd be good. So you assume if we sold this business today, this is our best estimate of what we think it's worth.
Exactly.
Is that the approach? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Because we all know about once you start doing projected income, it's just kind of like doing a cash flow sheet. I've always thought I was too stupid to do one, because if I change a number, I get the number I like. And so I'll always like my cash flow. And I probably won't ever be right. Any other questions?
How do you have those conversations in the family, Roy? How do you start the conversation?
Today,
Yeah.
Lynn does it.
That's good. Yeah.
It's very challenging for many families because of the dynamics, but I can say that Linda and Vanjie and Ruth and Mary are good friends. They travel together, and Steve and I, so we can have conversations that some people can't have. And I don't think we're the norm. I think we're maybe the exception to the norm. Somebody said, your family kind of won the lottery, and I think we kind of did, because I see it in some other situations being a very difficult discussion to have. And then what if Mary wouldn't have agreed? What if Steve wouldn't have done that? What if I wouldn't have, just what if? And so in all of these things, at some point, the giver has to determine what they're going to live with. And the receiver needs to be happy with it. In my situation, I was underqualified and overpaid. I had a good job. And so and I've always thought this, and had I not got any inheritance at all, I guess I had a good life anyway. So as long as a person is in that position and is compensated from the business, you can't get too greedy. You have to just take what happens. That would be my perspective on that. Yes.
Roy, do you have, through all of these years, and especially when you're bringing in the next generation, do you have any kind of formal communication? In other words, is there a certain time when you get everybody together and say, hey, we got to sit down, we got to talk this through? Or is it just more informal as the situation arises?
At one point, it was semi-formal. My parents would get with us and we'd have the discussion. Now, obviously, it's much less formal because my kids aren't really, Mark's the only one that's engaged in it. We haven't been willing to go ahead and say, okay, you're going to get this, you're going to get that, and sorry you missed out over here. But there will come a time when we think we will have that discussion and say, this is a way we see the division, and here's why we did it. And it's all going to be influenced by our tax person that we've worked with for so many years, and what she has seen and what she knows, what should be felt as being equitable or fair to all the members involved. And so that's what we'll do. And so it doesn't mean that they get, let's say, something is transferred from us to Lou. That doesn't mean he has any control of it. We could still take all the profits off the business or whatever that entity was until we were gone. So he might know this is what's coming, but take no gains off of it. So many different scenarios could be played out. You can try.
Can I talk? Uh-oh. No, I just wanted to put in a plug for the attorneys and trust people in Kansas City. I don't see people like this in agriculture much, and we need more of them. Siegfried Bingham is a law firm in Kansas City that has some very noteworthy clientele. The only hump that didn't go to jail. They've done all the work for the hospital conglomerate in Kansas City. They work in very large trusts and handling large amounts of assets and passing it on and moving it around. And Larry Bingham is now dead, but he was a good friend. And Cindy McClanahan is the one we know, and she has been phenomenal. They don't look at it like,
Okay.
Justin, you know, the local bankers, you want to buy $100,000, well, what's grandpa's land worth like loan against? That concept, they don't, and ag needs more of what they're doing. And they have a new, brilliant young attorney who joined their force that we in Abilene are very proud of. His name's Curry Sexton. So, good case stater there.
He can catch the ball.
So for those of you that don't know, I allowed my brother Steve to talk. And sitting next to him is his wife Angie. Angie. And then over here against the wall is Luke, our son, and his wife Lindsay. And then Linda's sitting against the wall, and our daughter Amanda's sitting with her. And then right ahead of Steve and Angie is Fadi, Johnny, Amanda's husband, and then Amani. And Amani's our oldest grandchild. And so, you know, the oldest is always special.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I told you about this nurse that worked in the ER room and told me, I asked her what she would recommend to patients, you know, to stay out in order to avoid going to see them. You know, her first thing was to get your COVID shot. And the second thing she would recommend is sell your motorcycle. Because she's seen bad ones walk in the door. And I'm sure she can't tell you how bad and stuff, but when she tells me that people beg for shots and then go ahead and die, it's sad. And you know, it's just an unfortunate situation for all of us. So, any other questions? Yeah.
So do all members of the family have formal positions in the company, or how does that work?
Formal
Positions.
Not now, no. Just Linda and I would be the officers. And but see, we got Henry's Limited, and then we have Henry Farms, and then we have Henry Pork, and then there's Redhead Real Estate, that'd be Mark and Kate of that. And so we got a lot of things split up, and so over time we'll have to spend some more
Are
time.
those all C corps?
No, LLCs.
Those are all LLCs.
Henry's Limited is the only C corp. But
And is the land held in the C corp?
yes. So we did some things wrong, but we did some things right with it too. So,
So the LLCs, then all of that is flow through income then for tax purposes?
Henry's Limited is in the manure business, and that's what it, and then Henry Farms has to do with all the crops. and then Henry Port, is where the money is that pays for, you know, the buildings and all of the other things.
Okay.
So when you think, I didn't show you pictures, but we've done quite extensive construction to build the 5,000 South farm. So that's gonna take some visiting about how we do that. So obviously Mark is the one, our son that's home is the one that did that. But obviously we're business partners. And so he ultimately, he's gonna have that all to himself, but how do we judge the dollars and have to shift the dollars and all these things? And so it's an ongoing conversation that we'll decide something this year, maybe it'll change next year.
Is the ownership of each business the same?
No. No, Henry's Limited would be Linda and Roy.
Okay,
Henry Ford would be Kate and Mark and Linda and Roy.
okay.
And then Henry Farms would be all Linda and Roy, and the other would be Mark and Kate. So, no, Mike.
You're talking about the difference of C Corp and LLCs, especially for our grad students, and we have several in the audience. Can you explain why, or what's the advantage of one versus the other, and what it means to you?
You just went past my pay grade.
Have Steve explain.
Yeah, how Steve explain it, yeah.
We should probably get somebody that's qualified. Limited liability companies have great benefits when you try to move it from one person to another, and they have tax benefits. The biggest thing about moving them from one person to another is that you can do it without battling through the stepped up basis problems that you get into with C Corp. C Corps are fine for holding the land. Stuff that goes on a long time. It's a terrible way to do business in agriculture.
And you bailed me out one more time. Yes.
And designing your new facilities and so on, and management structure and so forth, will you be able to sell pork product into California? They have some very rigid requirements now and so on.
We'll have to shoot a few sounds, then we can. We are at about 20 square feet per gestating female right now. It has to be 24 in California. So let's say that opportunity comes and it's viable and it's not just a fad, that if it's a long-term deal. And if you have a packer, I don't think too many packers are going on. They'll just give up that market and let some packer take California. I think that'll happen. I don't think every packer will try to go after that market to get their supply chain to the open pen gestation. So we build it this way, so if we had to comply, we would either cut sow numbers or add more barn space, but that would take a significant commitment on the buyer that I don't think they will make to us to do that. So, no, and the world's changing. You know, when I got out of school, it's been 50 years ago, and we could have little lagoons running down the greater ditch, and we built our big lagoon without a permit, and we just kind of were like cowboys and just did whatever we wanted to do. But the rules have changed on everything, and now the consumer decides they want to help us decide how to treat their animals and raise their animals, and rightfully so in some situations, that it's going to change what we do. Joel.
Hey, along that line, you've seen from getting pigs at the sale barn to raising your Poland Chinas, you know, like the progress your family or changes that's been made. Where do you see the Kansas swine industry? You've been part of it for many decades. You've kind of seen where we've come the last 10 years, and you know some of the packer ownership and trying something you're part of. Where's our Kansas swine industry headed, or what's it going to take for it to be successful in Kansas? Where do you see it down the line?
I've been on national boards, so I've met a lot of different people, a lot of different sizes, and on those boards you want diversity, because you know a few percentage of the people in the U.S. raise a high percentage of the pigs. So I've been on boards when I was 100 times bigger than the smallest, and somebody was 100 times bigger than I was. And so there's a lot of diversity, but what we do see is everybody's getting together, everybody's merging, and everybody's trying to become vertically integrated. There's a tremendous difference between the open market pigs and the vertically integrated pigs. So long-term sustainability is going to be, where do you fit in this marketplace? A producer recently told me, he said, I don't know how much longer I'll have a place to sell my pigs. Because when we sell pigs, they want to know a whole bunch of things about how we're raising, what we're feeding, the genetics we have, how we handle the pigs. We've got to have certifications for everything. And so the other smaller producer won't have that. And they won't put up with the hassle. So therefore, in Kansas, I see sow farms moving to Kansas because it's fairly open areas. I don't see a lot more finishing moving to Kansas. I think that finish will still migrate to where the grain is more. And I think there'll be more mergers. When we built this sow farm, what happened was we were going to build half of it, 2,500 sows, going from basically 1,500 sows to 2,500. And then we were going to go and double it sometime in the future. And what happened was we got the first part done, had an open house, and somebody came in that said they'd pay for the second half if they could have the pigs, or we could build it and they'd buy pigs from us. And so, good situation or bad situation, so we built the second half, which we hadn't planned on right away. Maybe Mark had, but Linda and Roy hadn't. And it was built, so now we're selling half of our pigs as feeder pigs, and we're finishing out the other half. Historically, I'm going to say that selling feeder pigs is not the path I want to go down. But when I think about the changes that are occurring, and if we can figure out a good way, I told the grad students this today, and they're going to work on it for me, and they'll give me an answer soon, I'm sure. How do you equitably share the profit in that pig between the farrowing facility and the grower? And if you can do that, see, then all of a sudden it's easier for us to work, because when the markets go up and you make a lot of money on growing pigs, and when you sell your feeder pigs, your feeder pig price is based on a projected income and the projected price in the future, and you don't know if that's real, and it might be higher or low. So I think Kansas, the numbers of producers like myself will go down, but the number of pigs in Kansas will probably go up. There's a lot of us that are my age, and there's a lot of families that don't have people that want to do what I do. You know, and I had a question asked today, how much time do I spend in the barn? And it's 0. You know, it's kind of okay with me, and it's definitely okay with the people in the barns. Gordon.
Could you provide your thoughts or insight on not only succession planning and planning how the future generation takes over a business like that, but also providing significant investment into the company, 5,000 sows. Are there any unique aspects of that, of planning for the future in terms of passing the business on, but also significant investment today?
Could you take your mask off and give it to me one more time?
Sure.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, and with not only considering succession planning, how to transfer that business to the future generation, but also significant investment today, a substantial number of new sows in that facility. Are there any unique aspects to that of planning for the future, but also investing today in growth in the business today?
How do you decide not to retire and stuff?
That's a good question. It probably, to answer the question honestly, I say it's easier to say yes than no to allow it to happen. We could have come up with a plan and a reason, probably say we should not do it at this time, but we could come up with some good reasons we should. Cost of materials, for example, the material for the second phase were bought in January. And I think in the middle of February where they came in, it looked like a whole train carload of lumber. The price on the lumber had gone up 50%. So you say, awesome, we save money. No, it doesn't change anything. You still have a big debt to service. You know, it's just we didn't pay as much as we would have later. So no, there's going to be a lot of discussion we have to have. You know, it's going to be difficult to work through, but I think with communication, with the right mediators and stuff, it'll be fine. Because somebody has to say, well, this is really the way it works. emotionally, we can get attached or detached about it, but we still have to have that business mind that says, tax-wise and state-wise, this is what has to happen. Yes.
What kind of planning does a business like yours do for a potential epidemic of African swine fever?
Just bought a backhoe. We do. Linda has filled out the paperwork and stuff, and what if this occurs, and so we can be a qualified, secure pork supply. And that means, you have to bake your trucks, you have to tag your trucks, you have to have a whole bunch of other things in place. So if it were to occur, your packer would know that you were a secure pork supply if you weren't ground zero. And so that's what we do to hopefully be able to have access to a market. Because when that occurs, what's going to happen? We didn't see this COVID market blowing up like it did. And, it just came out of the blue. So when we get this epidemic again in the swine part, what will other countries do? I think it'll be very easy for them to just shut us off for a while. And so the packer might take your pigs, but what's he going to do with them? And so I'm going to be retired by then, or shortly thereafter. Anything else? Well, thank you for all your attention and interest in what we do. And I hope most of what I said was factual.
And Roy, we appreciate you being here. It's been a long day. Ken and I met out front at 8 o'clock. He's talked to the swine science class, talked to the deans, talked to the introductory animal sciences course, grad students at lunch, faculty in the afternoon, and now the seminar this afternoon. It's all been excellent. Thank you very much, Roy.